we probably will, we are 15 minutes late, but this is our last class in our Lamentations, and I promise that we will unsolve of the mystery why the Lamentations, the whole book, created in acrostic form. What does it mean? It means, everybody can help me here. Chapter 1, how many verses? 22. In which order? Alphabetical order from the Aleph until Ta. Okay, it's just like our English from A to Z. Okay, and then chapter 22, how many verses? 22 verses, still in the alphabetical order. Okay, how about chapter 3? 66 verses, but also in alphabetical order. You say, how can it be 22 in alphabetical order? How about 66? 66 is every 3 verses with the alphabetical order. Okay, chapter 4, how many verses again? 22 in alphabetical order. Okay, suddenly come to the last chapter. 22, yes, still 22 verses, but not in the alphabetical order. So we mentioned, so from the first sight, when you see your loved one at the first sight, okay, it was like, whoa, what does it mean? Why chapter 3 need to have 66 verses? And if they wanted the whole books in alphabetical order, why in the chapter 5 they lose that alphabetical order? What does it mean? And we say today we are going, in the chapter 3 when we studied it, we already mentioned about why it's 66 verses, because in the chapter 3 is loaded with theology, with God. 4 different titles mentioned, refer to God, okay? So chapter 3 seems like a very, very big, important message for us. So right now we come to chapter 5 now. We are going to unsolve all the mystery. Why is this? Why is that? Okay. So since our time will not have enough for us to go through everything, so I will pick and choose. But I will at least to unfold the important, the significance, especially when you study in the biblical poetry in the alphabetical order, then you realize what is the message the author tried to convey. Okay, so let us have your hand out, chapter 5. Chapter 5, as we say also in 22 verses, without alphabetical order, and it starting with very interesting. If you remember chapter 1, we say it's 2 voices, right? Many voices. We call it polyphonic, means many voices in the text. So the major voices is 2. One is the narrator. Sometimes we also in chapter 1, especially very obvious, seems like he is the reporter reporting what the devastation has occurred after the destruction of Jerusalem in the historical setting, 587 or 586 BC. That's if you still remember the history of Israel, you mean when Solomon died and his son Rehoboam and Jeroboam divided the kingdom. You have northern kingdom Israel, southern kingdom Judah. Northern kingdom because they are really rebel against God's will. So after all the prophets' warning, they still did not listen. So in the 722 BC, northern kingdom was no more be taken away by Assyria. But the southern kingdom, Judah, did not take the lesson at all. They continue to reveal And then finally, at the last king, Zedekiah, that we already mentioned in the chapter 4, mentioned, and then in the 587 BC, they were exiled to Babylon. And that probably is really, right now, is so all the lamentation, all the mourning and grieving and everything, chapter 1 emphasized about the sin. I have sinned. God is right. Okay, so he went through after so he mentioned about widowhood. What a beautiful city right now, sit alone like a widow. Okay, and then suddenly come to the chapter 5. The widow happened 2 times in the first chapter and the last chapter, chapter 5. So it come back again to mention that devastation in Jerusalem and also Judah. So from this one, second chapter, you mentioned from the verse 1 until the verse 19. That's all the voice of narrator, or maybe the prophet Jeremiah, or maybe the reporter, you can say. They're talking about the situation, about the anger of God. So if chapter 2 focus on the sin, then chapter 2 focus on God's anger in his punishment. So chapter 2 is a lot of different description about God's anger against sin. Okay, chapter 1, sin really hurts. But the reason is, okay, first chapter, then it focus on the enemies, destroy us, and all the devastation. Chapter 2 become God is my enemy, becomes my enemy. Okay, God like an enemy to me. Okay, this is chapter 2. Chapter 3, from the verse 1 to verse 19 is the narrator reporting, it's so sad you are doing this, and there's God's anger upon you. Call out to God. In the verse, if you come to your chapter 2, you will see, later I will show you, you will see that they ask themselves, rise up, call out. And the Zion personification as a woman, as a widow, she speak out in the chapter 2, verse 20 to 22. Okay, so she speak out and cried out to God, but the focus on my situation. God, you punish my enemy. Okay, chapter 3 totally turn from the polyphonic, many voices become monologue. Focus on the person who said it. I am the man. Okay, so we mentioned about the man. Who is the man? Okay, why use the definite article? Why all the men in the books never use definite article, but the man in the chapter 3 mentioned is used definite article, and so we already referred it to, and also see the foreshadow of the man who bear our sin and our iniquities. Chapter 3. Chapter 4, we go to the, chapter 3 is also very interesting, is in all books of lamentation, God never speak. But only one time we overheard him speak is through the man's voice, say, before I cry out to you, and you say to me, do not fear. Do not fear, or fear not. Okay, that's chapter 3. And sounds familiar. You remember Jesus on the ship, and the storm coming out, and the disciples are, you don't care, teacher. Do you not care? We are going to die. And he said, fear not. Okay, so that is kind of interesting. But in the verse 4 is a different set. From the monologue, again, go to some voices you heard, okay? And then finally come to chapter 5 is a choir singing. and everyone is the choir member. Okay? Not only today, those choirs singing in the choir loft. Everybody is a choir. One of the member in the choir. You only hear one voice. And the voice is to, I say in other chapter, you see that speaking to Zion, speaking about Zion, speaking about God, speaking to God. But in the chapter 5, only speaking to God in prayer. So chapter 5 is a prayer. So we are going to see why it's so important, chapter 5. Okay, so if you would like, you will see the first verse, the first word is remember. And today, you sing it, you said it, you read it in the scripture, say, Jesus, remember me when you come to your kingdom. It's not God forsaken him, forget him, but remember, just like the thief, one of the thieves on the cross, say, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And this remember actually is a very big word in the Old Testament theology, is God's, appear to God's mercy and grace. Is look upon me, like we already say in the previous chapter, we have a theory, and I love that theory. Kathy is here, right? Yeah, Kathy helped us to mention that boo-boo theory, right? Look and see. That's over repeating in the lamentation. Look and see. I got boo-boo. Need some kiss, okay? Some God's attention. So that is remember me, not in your anger, but remember me in your mercy. Okay. So suddenly all the talking about the devastation, talking about all the things happening, come into one voice addressed to God himself. So it's starting with this. So the whole chapter is a prayer. Whole chapter is a prayer. So since our time is not sufficient, and I just want to focus something, and we will finish it. Okay, if you have a note, you see, chorus voices in prayer, the voice of the whole community speaking to God. And all in this prayer, the God happening only in one accord. You remember in the first, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4, God always mentioned in two forms. One is Yahweh, that's a covenant God, and also the first revelation to the whole humankind who he is. Okay, so that is when he appeared to Moses in the burning bushes, and he said, how can they believe it? You sent me. If they ask me, who sent me? What should I say? So God tell Moses, say, I am who I am. So this is the Yahweh. And Yahweh always remind us is a covenant God. Is a God love Israel. The God love his own people. God fight for his own people. God will care for his own people. So this Yahweh is always a covenant that you will be my God and I will be your people forever. Okay, so this Yahweh. Suddenly, but in another words, also Adonai is my Lord. Lord is in the, so I mentioned that if you see your ESV, they distinguish when they use Yahweh, they always use all four capital. But if they use Adonai, they use only L capital. Okay. But suddenly in old chapter appear to two forms. Suddenly come to chapter 5, only use Yahweh, the covenant God. Okay, we mentioned, remember me, the covenant you have promised to our forefathers. Okay, so appear to God Remember the covenant. Remember the love we have for each other. Remember the covenant I confess before God and man that even unto death. I'll be faithful even unto death. You remember the confirmation? We still keep that covenant? Okay, so this is in the very interesting, suddenly in the chapter 5, use only Yahweh. Okay, very interesting. Okay, so, and also is you, because it's a prayer. So you also, you and we, because it's a chorus. So always use you and we. Okay, so yes, the suffering community, not only one, even one suffer, all cry out to God for mercy. Okay, and in the chapter, the second part, I have the close connection between chapter 1 and chapter 5. If you still remember last Sunday, we talked about the construction of the chapter 1, like talking about the aftermath. 3 like this, and 4 come back here. Sorry. 4 and 5. 5. Okay. The construction looked like this. So chapter 1 and chapter 5 all describes the aftermath after the and this chapter 2 and chapter 4 all describe in that situation. Chapter 3 is loaded with the theology. I say not only use the way the God Yahweh, they use the Adonai. They also use God Most High, and also use the regular one, God in heaven. In chapter 3. So it wants us to focus. That probably is the major message here he wants to present. So we are continue to see our handout. But so at that time, last week, we actually, when we studied chapter 4, we really studied the connection between chapter 2 and chapter 4. They are similar. The only difference is when the chapter 1 filled with the air of despair, after the destruction, chapter 2 also, even they are very similar. Chapter 2 also talk about God's anger so bad. During the destruction is actually God's anger strike down the city. Actually, it's God's wrath that caused all the problems. No hope. The only hope here is my enemy be destroyed. Okay. Chapter 3 is just very interesting. God, focus on God. God is not only the anger, God also His compassion. So that's why we remember this song. We sing it 2 times, right? The steadfast of the love of God never ceases. His mercy, okay, and great is thy faithfulness. Okay, so chapter 4. Kind of similar to chapter 2. In language, we already studied that, so I don't want to repeat. But actually, there is a hope. The hope at the very, very end is in the verse, probably in the verse 21, 22, they say, Edom, the daughter, the suffering, the punishment of the sin of Judah already, the daughter of Zion will no longer, okay? But the punishment for the sins of Edom, and we discuss about why use the daughter of Zion and daughter of Edom as a contrast, okay? Yes, God's righteous, he punished the sin of the Zion, okay? But right now, his hand, because his justice, he also will punish the sin of Edom. Okay, so it's with the hope. Suddenly, This without hope, this with hope. And this one, despair, and this one we are going to see. Okay, so that is, I'm not going to the close parallel and use the same language or theme or motifs between chapter 1 and chapter 5 because we don't have time, so we just skip that part, okay? Chapter 2. Because I want very focused. Okay, chapter 3. Oh, not chapter 3. Sorry, you turned it over. Is section 3. Thematic developments in lamentation. Interesting is, a lot of people say is the structurized is the acrostic, alphabetical poetry, but it's a form. How about their content? Is those content have some relation between one chapter to another chapter? Then we are going to see this. If you imprint this pattern in your head, that is my success for today. Okay, how about chapter 1? Chapter 1 talking about the situation in Jerusalem and Judah after the destruction, an atmosphere of despair. There's all the grieving, all the mourning, all the suffering, they all there. Okay, A, she has none to comfort her is the most we can say is the key phrase in the chapter 1. He has none to comfort her. She had no one to comfort her. There is no comforter for her. So it repeated actually 5 times in chapter 1. So it's an atmosphere of despair. No hope. The enemies will suffer like Zion in verse 22. Probably is the only slight sense. I got punished. You will be punished too. Okay, that's the only hope. Okay. And then second, C is, so that's our talking when we are in a grieving, especially the pain and suffering caused by other people, that we are always say, God, take revenge. What the people, they do to me, okay? So that is kind of very interesting. The only hope probably is my enemy got punished, okay? See, no prayer for salvation, no expression of hope for a change in all the situation. So that is nothing at all there. It's the chapter. Chapter 2 is talking about the event during the destruction, a feeling of despair. A feeling of despair or a feeling of the devastation is also here. No hope, no nothing at all. Okay, and then come to we skip chapter 3. Why? Because 66 verses, we already know that already, okay? Chapter 4, the event of the destruction. So if this one, event of during the destruction, chapter 4 also event destruction. So we study the interconnection between these 2 chapters. But chapter 5 and chapter 1 is similar aftermath, after the destruction. So we are going to see chapter 4 first. Attribute the destruction mainly to the, chapter 2, do we say that? Chapter 2. God is the enemy responsible for the event. I already say chapter 2 is focused on the anger of God punish the sin of the Israelites. So and then there's B, no treaty for salvation. They only plainly say how poor I am, how painful I have been through, what a loss I already experienced. That's it. But they did not express it, Lord changed my situation. Not at all. Not. Okay, so how about B? No treaty for salvation, no expression of hope, and no possibility of comfort. And but it come to chapter 4, suddenly things changed. They did not attribute the destruction to God alone. Mainly, actually, in chapter 4, is mainly to the earthly enemies. And those verses will show you where are the enemies in the chapter. So I just assume you already read chapter 5. Okay. And then B, ends with the confidence that God will punish the daughter of Zion no longer, and that the sin of daughter of Edom will be punished. Suddenly, the same situation after chapter 3 with hope. Okay, with hope in chapter 4. And how about chapter 5? Chapter 5 also, like a chapter 1, reflects on the result of the destruction. Open with a direct plea to God. So we say chapter 5 is a prayer. Is a prayer to God. And close with an explicit entreaty to God to change the existing situation. No longer complain, no longer mourning. It's still mourning and still in grieving, but they changed to say, God, do something about this. Okay, so we are going to see that one. It says, restore to us, if you see your verse in the chapter 5, verse 20. Verse 20, why do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us for so many days? Verse 21, restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old. Actually, in the Hebrew translation, it's more like make us return to yourself, O Lord, that we may return to you. What does it mean? God, only you are the one can make us return to you. We are incapable, especially in the grief, in the mourning, in the sadness, in despair. It's not that we can do something to get out of the feelings or get out of the emotions or get out of anything to be comforted. Only when, Lord, you comfort us, then I will be comforted. Yes. Yeah. Epiphany. So what? Very good. Thank you. So where did epiphany come from? Sudden change after chapter 3. No hope, despair, with hope, gleam hope, no hope, with hope. Chapter 3 is the message we want us to learn. Even in our sufferings, God's steadfast love never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. So Lord, help. When they address to God, they know that their only hope, their only choice, their only confidence will be still in the Lord. Okay, so that's why that is the situation, and then we continue. Then I will explain everything. Okay, B, no mention of enemy. You remember chapter 1? End of enemy. Chapter 2? Chapter 3? Enemy. Chapter 4 talking about enemy. Chapter 5, not even mention the word of enemy. The focus is in God. The focus is not on my enemy. Yes, sometimes when we are in a very, very down situations, like Isaiah say, I was cast out in the darkness, but the Lord is the light, is my light forever. So we talk to our neighbors, don't be boasting because He is my life forever. Yes, it's a boasting on Christ. But here, actually, more emphasis is when we able to turn to God in prayer. And that's also the purpose of lamentations. I cannot give you any answer. I cannot give you more comfort. I cannot do anything make you feel better. But I know my hope is in the Lord. In that Lord mentioned not only his anger, but mentioned on the chapter 3, God will not forsake us forever. That is the chapter 3 message. Okay, so even despite the hardship and deep sorrow, there is hope expressed in prayer to God. So the chapter 5, from the polyphonic chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter with many voices, chapter 5, only one chorus voice addressed to God in prayer. Okay. So we'll continue, re-examine the function of acrostic structure. As we already mentioned, that is we want to solve, right? Okay, so A is unrestrained content and the restrict form. What does it mean? Unrestrained content is the content lamentation is a lot of grieving, a lot of mourning, a lot of pain, a lot of loss, a lot of sorrow, a lot of suffering, a lot of weeping and tears. That is the content. And we also mentioned one time, when we are in sorrow, we did not say to pray to God from A to B, or A to Z, right? We won't say about A, the first verse, about my suffering, B what? Be very alone am I, and then come to C. Cause I am really hurt. We won't do that. When we are in suffering, we cried. We probably say words never make sense, but only make sense to myself because we are in that extreme emotion. But in the lamentation, it's totally different. They use, as we say, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, all in alphabetical order. 22 verses from Aleph to Tau, from A to Z. Okay. So it means that I remember Beth mentioned respond to this question. He said, probably it's after we reflect upon our loss. When we reflect upon our suffering, then we learn something. Okay, so lamentation is created in this way to teach us some lesson in chapter 3. Okay, so continue. B, the concentric structure of each acrostic point, the fundamental message is concealed in the center of each point. Very interesting. This is, we call it concentric form, means chapter 1 and chapter 5, very similar in words, in motifs, in language, in themes. And chapter 2 and chapter 4, very similar in the same situation. But chapter 3 is actually the main message. They ask test the theory. How about your chapter 1? Bring out your hand out, chapter 1. What is in the middle? 22 verses. If in the middle is which two verses will be in the middle? 11 and 12, right? It's 22 verses. So right in the middle, two verses will be 11 and 12. So if you come to your chapter 1, verse 11 and 12, all her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. Verse 12 is actually our theme verse that every week. Is it nothing to you, O you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow. Okay, so we use when we study chapter 1, we use the theme verse. Is it nothing to you, O you who pass by? And we mentioned about those pass by during the Jesus crucifixion. The pass by say, if you come down, I will believe you. You say you save others, you cannot save yourself. So, in the lamentation, not encouraging us to be the passerby. No matter it's your own suffering or your brothers and sisters' suffering. And remember that before the cross of Jesus, we will never be passed by. Does his pain, his pierced wound mean nothing to you at all? Okay, so this is a very, very important point. We are not a passerby. We feel nothing at all to God's suffering and die on the cross for our sin. Okay, how about chapter 2? So the main point, the concealed message, actually in the very center. Okay, chapter 2 also alphabetical form. So in the chapter 2, verse 11 and verse, this one is still chapter 1. In the chapter 2, verse 11 and 12. My eyes are spent with weeping, my stomach churns, my bile is poured out to the ground because of the destruction of the daughter of my people, because infants and babies faint in the streets of the city. Verse 12. They cry to their mother, where is bread and wine? Okay, so we say, how a baby cry for wine, cry for food? Makes sense, right? Why cry for wine? What did it refer to? What did it really make you think of? And at that time, you all say, the Lord's Supper. So that is the message. Is go. He is the only one revive our soul. He is the only one. So that is the message for chapter 2. I'm not going to say too much because of our time. But okay, chapter 3. What is in the middle? How about verse 11 and verse 12? Oh, sorry. Chapter 3, how many verses? 66. We called it triple acrostic. Okay, so this triple, what? In the 66 verses, what will be in the middle? 33 maybe, right? But, okay, so if we go to the chapter 3, it's right in the middle. It's actually from, yes, you are right, from verse, because 3 verses in one alphabet, okay? So it's actually start from verse 31 until verse 36. Very interesting is that is exactly the turning point from the complaint, from the agony, look up to God. Okay, if I can read it for you in our chapter 3, verse 31 to 36. Verse 31 to 36. For the Lord will not cast off forever. Means God will not forsake us forever. Suddenly, they already feel abandonment. They feel in the whole book of Lamentation, God did not speak a word. Suddenly, they know that. What caused them to think about that? In the mourning, in the loss, in the grieving, they come out with this trust and confidence, say, the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he caused grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve the children of men. Is that the answer? Is that the answer for those people want to know about? Just like Pastor Andrew today's sermon punched to us to the very heart, very deep of our soul. Say, for he loves me and gave himself for me. Okay, so that is the major. He is, because in all suffering, say, Lord, you caused all this. You allowed this to happen. But here tell us, remember this, he is not willing. He does not willingly afflict or grieve the children of men. That is not his attention. And he will not and then the verse 34. He did not willingly to crush underfoot all the prisons of the earth. Crush them underfoot is not, even the prisoner is not he willing to do. And verse 35. He is not willingly to deny a man's justice in the presence of the Most High. He is not willing to sever a man in his lawsuit. The Lord does not approve this such of things. This is from verse 31 in the middle message. And if you read through the Lamentation chapter 3, that is the main focus. So, yeah, it makes sense if the whole Lamentation, 5 chapters, is created in this concentric structure. The main message is during or in the midst of our suffering. Never forget what he said in the chapter 3. That is the message we need to know. So this kind of message, also very interesting, is chapter 5. Okay, so see, I have the chiastic structure. Chiasmus or chiasm actually mention the same thing in the century. So in the poetry, if you go to the very center of the message, they will be the main message. So that's why chapter 1 to chapter 5 want us to focus the main message in chapter 3. Okay, so focus our reader's attention on the center of the structure, which contains the main message. That's why we ask the first question is, why chapter 3 have 66 instead of 22? Okay, so that is the reason. That is the focus of what Lamentation going to teach. And very interesting, if you read through the Lamentation, you will see the teaching saying, wisdom teaching saying actually happened in chapter 3. So what about chapter 5? Okay, the function of, it's a 5, the re-exam, we already re-examined. The function of chapter 3, triple acrostic, and chapter 5, 22 verse, but not acrostic. Okay, so that structure make us know that the book, chapter 1 to chapter 5, is a unified authorship. It's not because a lot of modern scholars believe chapter 1 somebody write it, chapter 2 somebody write it, chapter 3 everybody write it on, and then just connect it together in one. No, from the literature study, we know that it's actually from chapter 1 to chapter 5. They are united as one. You cannot break the chain. Okay, so we prove the unity of the book of Lamentations. Okay, we also talk about chapter 3, triple acrostic, is because it's the essential part of the message will be in chapter 3. And how about chapter 5? If like this, how about acrostic, 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 acrostic? And then the last chapter also acrostic. No, actually, all these 4 chapters will make us to focus. If those are theories, chapter 5 is a application. It's the practice of our faith. It's practice what we learned. Come to God in prayer. So that's why I give you a verse in chapter 2, verse 19. You see the goal, the application, and climax of chapter 5. So chapter 2, verse 19. Our pursuer was swifter. Oh, no, this is chapter 4. Sorry. Chapter 2, verse 19. Chapter 2, verse 19 say, Arise, cry out in the night, at the beginning of the night watches. Pour out your hearts like water before the presence of the Lord. Lift out your hands to him for the lives of your children. So he said, cry, arise, cry out to God. And then come to the chapter 3, verse 40 to 41. chapter 3, verse 40 to 41. 40 to 41. Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and hands to God in heaven. And then also in the verse 57, 57 say, you came near when I call on you. You said, do not fear. Okay, so yes, if this God in the past can say to the people, say, do not fear, he will continue to say to me, I only need to cry out to him. So chapter 5 is a cry out to God in prayer. So chapter 5 is different. So cry out to God. No need to use A, B, C, D, E until Z. Just cry out whatever you want to cry out. That is the point. That is the point. So this is, so it reminds, Lamentation provides the foundation for Lamentation 5 to cry out to God. And Jesus' parallel teaching, you remember in Luke chapter 18, verse 1 to 8, about a widow. He go to ask the judge to give him justice, but the unjust, the judge did not want, just at the end, the unjust, the judge say, oh, he bothered me too much. Let me do something for her. You want us to always pray, return to the Lord and cry out to him. That is our message today. The faith, okay, let us read it together. Just recite it together. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. That's sing doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. God bless your days.